We now turn to the play that you read for this week, Sophocles' play Electra. It's the first play that we have on our list of plays by Sophocles. And I want to spend a bit of time here contrasting this play with Aeschylus, the libation bearers, and also getting a general sense of what Sophocles does with this tragedy in line with what we talked about Sophocles generally in our previous video to explain the philosophy that Sophocles uses when he composes tragedy. So the first thing to understand, again, is that this is in fact the same story being narrated as the one in Aeschylus' Libation Bearers. So part of what we're doing in this course is looking at the same myth being described by different tragedies in order to see how the myth is reworked by each author and what types of motivations would exist in the time periods that they live in to induce them to write the myths and rework the myths in some cases the way that they do. So I won't be able to go through a full excursus on Sophocles' Electra here, but I will just give you a few high points for your consideration. So first of all, the evident focus of Sophocles' Electra is the main character, Electra. That in itself is obviously a change from Libation Bearers, because there, although Electra does have that very important first scene when she approaches the tomb of her deceased father Agamemnon, pretty much she withdraws to the background once Orestes shows up and takes control of the situation and then ends up carrying out the plot to first kill Aegisthus and then murder his mother Clytemnestra there at the end there, at the inducing of his friend Pylades, reminding him about the oath that he took to Apollo. So that's all what goes on in Libation Bearers. Here, however, the focus has a great deal more to do at the beginning on the suffering that Electra has undergone because of the sacrifice of her sister years earlier by her father, and then the much more recent slaughter of her father and the exile of her brother that has resulted. So she's in quite a bad way. And she spends obviously quite a bit of her time, as you saw in this play, lamenting. And the chorus goes to extremes to tell her that she really is in fact lamenting beyond measure. There's a little bit of Aeschylus' Seven Against Thebes here. As you recall, there Eteocles was trying to caution and even shush the chorus, who was going on at much too great a length, expressing their fear of the impending attack against the city of Thebes by the Argives, led by Eteocles' in quotes, traitorous brother, Polynices. So here, Electra gets the attention. She's obviously the victim of everything that has happened in the family, and her state of lamentation appears at the beginning. From there, we see the interaction between Electra and her sister Chrysothemis, and this type of interaction between sisters will be much more famously replayed in Sophocles' play Antigone. You're coming to read that soon. That's the one showing Antigone and Ismene interacting in a similar way as sisters. So here the focus is on what these two sisters think about the situation, and the contrast between them really represents a Greek civilization-based contrast between a woman who is trying to observe her proper place in society, which is what Chrysothemis thinks should happen, versus what a woman thinks she should do in the face of either external or personal injustice, which is what Electra is doing, and which again will be played out with Antigone and Ismene in that play. So Electra opposes what Chrysothemis says, which is essentially to simply keep quiet and maintain her proper woman's role, because there simply isn't anything that women can do to oppose what the men want to do. She disagrees with that, and she insists on trying to go through with the plot to reconnect with her brother Orestes and eventually to carry out the murder. So what becomes quite interesting about the play afterwards is the nature of the reunion is that there's this really lengthy piece with Orestes appearing and not revealing himself to Electra right away. And of course, the tutor does quite a bit to encourage both Orestes and Pylades to keep going, and at times even has to urge them and Electra forward in order to make sure the plot is carried out successfully. So the tutor has a big role here, and that in itself is something of a change from Aeschylus, because the minor characters in an Aeschylean play don't usually take that type of center stage the way that the tutor does here. You then have a messenger who actually, as part of the plot, who comes in and delivers this very long speech about the chariot race in which Orestes is alleged to have been killed in. And of course, the entire audience listens to this essentially as a quasi-tragic speech and realizes that this messenger has come a really long way to deliver a speech about this tragic event that actually never happened. So there's something semi-comic in that particular speech, which of course is believed by everybody. Nobody at that point is in a position to realize that the speech is actually a fake one. And in the end, of course, Electra does believe it, and it's not until later as we see that Electra is actually going to be reunited with Orestes. So once they actually do get it together, though, you'll notice once again that there's a very long reconciliation scene between them until the tutor finally comes along and says, break it up, come on, we have 2 murders to carry out. And in this case, you have Clytemnestra, who actually is given an opportunity to present her side of the story, is still the one to be murdered. And she's actually murdered first. And then afterwards, Aegisthus is going to be tricked into going into the house to find out what's happening. And Aegisthus, of course, will be the last one murdered. Aegisthus actually is presented with a corpse that's supposed to be Orestes' corpse that has been brought home from the supposed chariot race. And if Aegisthus had stopped to think, he would have realized, as the introduction to your translation tells you, that in fact an entire body could not possibly have been transported that far across Greece, that Orestes' body would in that case have been cremated, and there would have been an urn of ashes, not this entire body. So Aegisthus is fooled, discovers immediately that Clytemnestra is actually the victim, and of course will be very quickly dispatched himself shortly after the play is carried out. What's also remarkable about this play, which might be a sign of things to come in Athens itself, is the surprisingly positive tone of the whole thing. As again your introduction points out, you start off with a scene in which it's dawn with birds beginning to sing, and you end with a scene in which the chorus has that very short piece at the end in which they basically say, isn't it great that finally, after all these years, the trials of the house of Atreus have at last been concluded. We've escaped. And there isn't any kind of real moral consideration of whether this murder should have been carried out the way it was. It seems to be almost a business-like affair of, this is what we're here for, we're going to carry out these murders, and we need to make sure we get it done. And the tutor, as we know, is there to keep on prodding to make sure that it gets done. So Sophocles appears to have been a very devoted politician and general in Athens. And the way he writes this play, it's too bad that we don't know its exact date, but the way he writes this play almost suggests that there's a certain type of insistence on the object that has to be gained. And it's important to get to that object without really stopping to consider any types of emotional factors, what one is going to feel afterwards. There is, in fact, no madness that strikes Orestes. The Furies do not appear. No one appears to criticize him. Interestingly, even Apollo does not actually appear to commend him either. And Apollo really is not mentioned very much in this play. So there's quite a bit of change away from the gods, as we talked about with Sophocles, that he tends to focus more on the ideal man, what he ought to be. And the idea of Orestes being able to rise to the occasion and carry out that awful tragedy that plunges us into darkness suggests that Orestes, in fact, is almost a self-motivated instrument of the tragic outcome, as opposed to simply someone who is forced to grope with the the great difficulty of the emotional circumstance that he's in, or also with the fact that he's under a divine injunction to carry out this murder, whether he wants to or not, which is what you get from the Aeschylean version. So the sense, therefore, that there is more to this story besides what the gods insist on, the fact that it's much more human-based and a great deal focused on Electra as a tragic character, the one who has to rise above her women's role as contrasted with her sister Chrysothemis. All of this is what makes this play quite different from Aeschylus. So what does this mean for Athens? Well, again, we can't be sure of the exact time period when this was produced, but Athens appears to have been very much on a roll, especially with Pericles. And I suspect that what could be reflected in this play is, the sense of the need to accomplish things. If, in fact, there is any kind of injustice that has been carried out, it may need to be righted, even if the process of righting it has tragic consequences. Again, Orestes and Electra seem capable of doing that, and once they actually pull it off, then the result is seen as a positive one. Now, it's always a point that with 2020 hindsight, that we know that the Athenian policy with Pericles was not necessarily an ideal or completely positive one for Athens. So did Sophocles want to carry out any particular warning to the Athenians about this? It's hard to say. But given Sophocles' role in the Athenian government, it could be that the type of mercilessness that he needed to use against the Samians might well reflect the kind of mercilessness that Orestes and Electra, especially Orestes, uses to punish Aegisthus and Clytemnestra. All right, then, we're going to go back to our Greek history. We're now closing in on the major tragic period in Athens, the Peloponnesian War, and we'll start giving you the run-up to that war in our next video. See you then.